Hi everyone, it's Kathy. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'll be sharing how to create an interactive slider card, and I'll be using the Kinetic Straight Basics die set, the Nosey Kinetic die set, the Grass and Cloud Edger die set, and of course the super cute Snail Mail stamp set. Here's a look at the card just so you can see where we're going to be going with this project. And I did want to really take the time to go over this process step by step. And this first piece here, the cardstock measures 4 by 5¼ inches. And this piece is going to be the main card front where I'll actually be die cutting the track out of for my little snail to travel across the front of the card. For my cloudy background, I just used one of the cloud dies from the Grass and Cloudy Edger die set and cut it from, it's actually fairly lightweight cardstock, just so that I could use it as a stencil. So after I was done doing the ink blending, I cut down a piece of green cardstock, and that piece measures 1 3/4 inches by 5¼ inches. And I'm going to use the straight Grass Edger die, and that's going to be on the very bottom of the card. So my snail is actually going to travel across that piece there. The second piece of green cardstock measures 1½ by 5¼ inches. Next, I'm going to choose the die from the Kinetic Straight Basics die so that I can cut a track into my main card panel. The Kinetic Straight Basics die set is the one that you need to use to cut the track. So whatever image you're using to travel across your card, that's the die set to use for that. I thought I was going to use the medium length die, but decided to use the shorter one instead, and I'm really glad that I did. Otherwise, my track would have been too long. One important thing to remember when you're placing the die on your card front to die cut the track, you want to make sure that you leave enough space underneath the track so you can apply some foam tape. Next, these are the dies from the Nosey Kinetic die set. And this long piece here, that's actually going to be your pull tab, which will pull your little critter across the front of your card. The shorter piece is the Nosey element, and the 2 circles, those are the discs that you'll attach the pull tab and the Nosey element to. To attach the dies to the cardstock, I just use Scotch removable tape because it won't tear my cardstock, yet it's strong enough to hold the dies in place. Now for a quick review of all the dies. The one on my main card base is from the Kinetic Straight Basics die set. That's going to cut the track. The Straight Grass die cut is going to cover the track. The Curvy Grass die cut is going to create a hill in the background. The long piece is going to be your pull tab. The short piece is going to be the Nosey element, and then you have the 2 discs that you'll attach the pull tab and the Nosey element to. I did die cut 2 of the pull tabs, and then I just adhered them together with some liquid glue. This isn't a necessary step. I chose to do it just to add a little bit more strength to my pull tab. Next, you're going to need those little discs. You're going to put a foam dot on top of one of the discs, and then you're going to place the disc behind your main panel so that the foam tape falls inside the track. Now you'll see that I'm putting the second disc directly on top of that foam dot, and technically you're not supposed to do that, but I did, and I'm going to make it work, so bear with me. Anyway, moving right along. Next, you're going to want to put some foam tape on the card base, and you'll have the foam tape go underneath the track. I'm using foam tape that is 1/4 inch wide, which worked out perfect. It was the exact width to fit underneath the track there. And you'll see that I was moving the disc back and forth just to make sure that I did have enough clearance. One thing to keep in mind, when you're adding foam tape up along the side of your main card panel, you don't want the foam tape to extend any higher than your piece of cardstock that is going to cover up the track. When applying foam tape on the side where the pull tab is going to be coming out of, I recommend that you place the pull tab on the main card panel and then cut a tiny piece of foam tape and put it directly above the pull tab. By adding that small piece of foam tape just above the pull tab, I guess the best way to explain it is that it kind of creates a little bit of a bumper for the pull tab so that the pull tab stays in its own lane and stays straight as it's pulled out. The next step is to figure out where you need to fold on the Nosey element. And it's very easy to fold because there are score lines that are embossed into it when you run it through your die cut machine. When you're deciding which score lines to fold on, you do want to fold along two score lines that are right next to each other. That way you'll create sort of a tabletop, so when you're pulling the pull tab out, the tabletop keeps the Nosey element from catching on your lower piece of cardstock. In my case, it would be the grassy border. And of course, depending on how tall your piece of cardstock is that covers the track, that will determine which score lines to fold on your Nosey element piece. You don't have to worry if the front of the Nosey element piece is too long. We'll be trimming the excess off with a pair of scissors a little bit later on. Before I started to adhere my pull tab and Nosey element together, I decided to stamp the word pull on the very end of my pull tab. And the pull stamp is from the Halloween postage stamp set, which also has other interactive words in there as well. It's a really good set to have if you do a lot of interactive cards. Anyway, moving on. The next step is to adhere the Nosey element to your pull tab. You do want to adhere the bottom of the Nosey element to the back side of the pull tab, and you do want to line up those circles as best you can. By the way, the circles are there to help you decide how long you need your pull tab. For my card, I needed to leave the pull tab its full length, but it does have the option to make it shorter if you need it to be shorter. And this is about the point where I realized that I should not have put that second disc on top right away, because those little holes there are actually twofold. They are put on there so that you can fit your little foam dot directly through those little holes. But since I had already adhered my second disc on top, I had to do another quick fix, so I added a small piece of foam tape on top of the second disc. I pressed my pull tab and Nosey element on top of the foam tape, and then I just cut out a third disc to adhere on top of my pull tab and my Nosey element. So basically, instead of just having a sandwich, I ended up with a double-decker sandwich, and it worked out just fine. The next step is to add my first grassy border, but before I do that, I want to pull on that pull tab and make sure that everything is moving as it should, which it did. I'm going to remove the release paper from the foam tape along the sides and the bottom, and I'm going to very carefully line up my first grassy panel and then press it into place. I'm going to pull the pull tab one more time, okay, 2 times, to make sure that things are still moving smoothly. And now it's time to attach my little snail. So I'm going to fold over the Nosey element and hold my snail in place just so I know where he'll be adhered down. I'll use my pencil to make a little mark so I know how much of the Nosey element to cut off. I'll trim the excess off with my scissors, and then I used liquid glue to adhere my snail to my Nosey element piece. Once he's in place, I have to test it one more time to make sure that he's gonna float across the front of the card, and now I can finish putting the card together. To add in the second grassy border, I made sure only to add liquid glue along the sides and the very bottom. I didn't have liquid glue go up to the very top of that grassy piece because I have some mushrooms that I had die cut and colored from the Build-A-Fairy Garden die set. Once I had my grassy hill adhered in place, I grabbed my snail, who is anxiously awaiting his mail delivery, and I played around with the placement. I wanted to have him be tucked behind that first layer of grass, and he was a little bit too tall, so I just kept trimming a little bit off the bottom until it was just right. I did want to have my little snail, who is anxiously awaiting his mail delivery, to be popped up, so I put a whole bunch of foam tape on the back side of that, removed the release paper, and adhered him in place. I did make sure to pull the pull tab out so that my snail, who is actually delivering the mail, was at the very end of the track, so I would know exactly where to place the snail sitting on top of the mailbox. Now that the main elements are placed on the card and my pull tab is moving smoothly, I decided to embellish the front of the card with some mushrooms from the Build-A-Fairy Garden die set. I cut them out and just colored them with my Copic markers. I also cut a bunch of daisies from the Spring Meadow Slimline die set and adhered those to the front of the card as well. After I had all of my mushrooms and little daisies adhered, I stamped the sentiment "Sending Hugs" using VersaFine Onyx Black ink to the front of my card panel. And I would recommend that if you're going to stamp a sentiment on the front, that you do it at this point now before adhering it to the front of your card base. Because on the backside of your main card panel, you want to load that baby up with a whole bunch of foam tape. And you want to make sure that you put your foam tape all the way around the edges and as well as in the center of the card panel. But you want to be very mindful and not get foam tape too close to the track, otherwise it'll impede the movement of the little slider element. So after I had a whole bunch of foam tape on the back side of my card panel, I removed all of the release paper and adhered that to the front of a top folding A2 size note card. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, we'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.